Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and we are officially in Hispanic Heritage Month. And historically speaking, I know a lot of readers are not going to show up. So to give you one less excuse, I'm here to share some Own Voices Latinx recommendations. My first recommendation has to be The Gods of Dangle by Carolina de Robertes. This is Own Voices queer Latinx historical fiction set in 1913 Buenos Aires about Dante, a trans violinist. Dante immigrates from Italy to Argentina to marry someone due to circumstance, but when he arrives, he is told that his spouse-to-be is actually dead. With no money, no contacts, and no way of returning home, Dante decides to sell everything but his violin and start presenting as a man in order to master the art of tango music. What starts off as a disguise and a means to survive leads Dante on a journey to finding love, music, passion, and self-acceptance. I will never stop talking about this book. You can pry it from my cold, dead, queer hands. First of all, I did make a standalone review video for this book, which you should definitely check out. This is one of those rare stories that actually explores how cross-dressing impacts gender identity and how presentation impacts a person's sense of self. This book's greatest triumph is how it explores gender as a gradient, as something that evolves and changes to fit whatever you need it to be in that moment. And as I said in my review, sometimes understanding yourself means understanding your limits and understanding what you can't do or be, changing things incrementally and realizing you cannot go back. And the tango is such a beautifully appropriate metaphor for Dante's journey, especially considering the genre's history and its roots. Every detail in the story works together in a way that is seamless. This book honestly changed my life, and I just want more people to get the chance to feel that. If you only listen to one recommendation in this video, this should be it. Next, I gotta show some love for Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. This is Own Voices Queer Lit about Juliet, who is leaving behind her family in the Bronx to go intern in Oregon for an indie author she loves. The night before she leaves, she decides to come out to her family, and they do not take it well. But she planned it that way so she could jet out of there and start fresh in Oregon working for this author who is a queer feminist icon, and she's hoping out there she can really redefine and explore herself. What really stands out about this book is the way it brilliantly interrogates the way feminism, which is more often than not actually white feminism, fails to intersect with brown, queer, or marginalized communities and spaces. Juliet finds herself thrust into these overwhelmingly white spaces where people are preaching feminism, but she doesn't see any reflection of herself or her experiences, especially as a queer Puerto Rican feminist. So she's learning that you either have to seek out or create those spaces yourself. And I think that's an incredibly valuable distinction to make, that we cannot fit ourselves to the dominant discourse, but rather we have to fit the discourse to our own experiences. You get to see Juliet discovering these pockets of brown queer spaces where everyone is centering love, support, and respect, and that is truly beautiful to see on the page. The story is all about finding your voice and carving out a space for yourself, because you are the only person who can do it. This book doesn't get enough love, and you should definitely read it. Next, I want to mention a book that is so good that as of assembling this list, I had not even finished it yet, and I knew I had to include it, and that is The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Casara. This is Own Voices queer historical fiction. I would pitch it as Paris is Burning meets A Little Life because it is an immaculate character study, a deep dive into the historically brown ball scene in 1980s New York. This story takes real historical figures, landmarks, and houses, but uses fiction to explore their existence. It begins with Hector Valle and his girl Angel and how they always wanted to start an all-Latino house, which eventually became known as the infamous House of Extravaganza. For those of you who don't know, houses were groups of usually queer folks who were either trans or drag queens, and the house would serve as both a found family and an organization they would represent when they competed in balls. And balls are these competitions where everyone would dress up in a way that was dramatic and extravagant, and there would be dancing and walking and voguing, and basically a group of judges would present trophies in various categories to the queens who slay the most. It's less about the ball scene itself and more about how these houses came to exist and the complicated lives of the queens who belonged to those houses and fought for their existence. The story deftly explores how difficult it is to be both Hispanic and queer, especially because these characters come from a culture that deeply values and perpetuates machismo, which is a word that describes aggressive displays of masculine pride. Extremely difficult realities are confronted in this book, and there's a bunch of trigger warnings for slurs, violence, abuse, disownment, police brutality, the realities of sex work, drug use, the transmission of diseases, murder, and suicide, which are actually off the page, and so on and so forth. But the fact that this story addresses those truths in a way that is honest and authentic shows a deep respect for the generations that came before us and what they had to face. And you see characters who identify as trans, characters who don't, characters who present as femme and characters who don't, characters who want to pass and characters who don't. There's such a great variety of queerness and every character has their place. It just makes me feel so much because you see these incredible queens who have been chewed up and spit out by society, by their loved ones, and you see what they've been through that makes them so fierce, so tough, so unforgiving, so fearless. But at the same time, the love they have to give to each other is that much greater because of what they've experienced. Seeing these queens who have each other's backs, who teach each other everything they need to know to survive, who build themselves up and celebrate each other every time they walk the streets, I mean, it is so powerful to read about. I love this so much. No, it is not easy to read at times, but it properly honors and celebrates the queens of the 1980s and the impact of their legacy, and I highly, highly recommend it. Next is a middle grade book I love, and that is Love, Sugar, Magic, A Dash of Trouble by Ana Mariano. I read this back in January when it was first released, and I have yet to see it receive the love it deserves. This is a middle grade story about Leonora Logroño, whose family owns and runs a local bakery, and they are preparing for a festival to celebrate Dia de los Muertos, which is their biggest event. Leo is really hoping that her family will let her help out this year, but once again they tell her she is just too young and that she shouldn't worry herself yet. Instead, Leo decides to skip school and sneak into the bakery where she finds out that her family has been keeping a secret. All the Logroño women are brujas and they mix magic into everything they bake. Even though Leo hasn't developed her powers yet, she is determined not to be left out, so she steals her family's ancient recipe book and ends up accidentally baking up some spells that could be mildly disastrous. I love how this story celebrates Mexican-American culture and how our heritage values and centers the family itself, which in turn calibrates everything about our lives. On top of that, the story explores how keeping secrets is damaging and creates an imbalance in our lives. You see this especially in how Leo feels shut out and cut off from her family and by extension from her culture, which turns her need to belong into something urgent and desperate. Then the tables turn when she steals the recipe book because suddenly she's keeping secrets and suddenly she's the one who needs help, and you see how the trouble she creates is something that she can't and shouldn't have to fix by herself. We are stronger together. We are made better when we all contribute and bring down those walls. This is a really fantastic, heartfelt, entertaining read that puts a fun new spin on classic spells gone wrong, and it should definitely be on your list. My last recommendation for today is The Education of Margo Sanchez by Lilian Rivera. This is an Own Voices YA contemporary story about Margo, whose family works hard to send her to a private school outside of the Bronx. But recently she was caught stealing her dad's credit card and using it to buy hundreds of dollars worth of clothes. As punishment, her parents decide that she is going to spend her summer working at the family grocery store to pay off her debt. This is not the summer Margo envisioned for herself, and she will do whatever it takes, no matter how shady, to get out of it. I read this recently and I really enjoyed it. The level of drama is akin to a telenovela, which I actually love because it shows a sense of passion, a sense of urgency, and it creates tension that really propels you through the pages. The heart of this story is Margo realizing who she really is. She's used to code switching, presenting herself in a certain way for her prep school friends and then hardening herself when she's home in the Bronx, and she's been very careful to keep those two parts separate. But as she comes to understand that pretty much everyone in her family is morally bankrupt, she realizes that she has to step up, clean up her act, and find a way to reconcile those two sides to figure out what is real, what matters, and to root out that toxicity in her life. Full disclosure, there is an unnecessary romance, but that's a minor element. It's more about how lies and shame slowly chip away at your sense of self, how young Latinx women have to battle against machismo to prove themselves and be seen, and how to have the courage to stand in your truth. So those are the 5 recommendations I had for today. In the comments, let me know if you plan on reading any of these for Hispanic Heritage Month, or feel free to throw your own Voices recommendations into the mix. But that's everything I had for this recommendations video today. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!